Hey everybody, Milo and Blake coming at you from beautiful Superstition Mountain, and today we have a video where we're going to talk a little bit about the changes that Blake and I made together that took him from struggling ball striking to an elite ball striker over the course of a fairly fast window.
So that was what, 5 years ago?
Yeah, it was about 5 years ago.
So I had been out of college, played Division I college golf for 4 years, and my first year of mini tour play, I started out okay. I was making some money and hitting it pretty good, but after kind of hit the 6-month point and the wheels came off, and I was struggling. And I remember going back and tracking my scores, and I was averaging about 73 for like the last 6 months before I started working, and I was frustrated and getting close to being done, because you know how that works. On mini tour, you need to be scoring average 69 or better in tournaments.
Yeah, and so I remember watching you, because you remember here.
Yeah. And
I'd sit and watch you practice the same thing over and over again.
Over and over again. I got really good at it.
And one day I finally got sick of watching it.
It just wasn't really good.
And I walked over and I interrupted you and said, "What the heck are you doing?"
Yeah. And so then we started working together. Within a couple of weeks, I saw huge progress in my ball striking. But you know how it is as a competitive player. You have to go out and play at that level to validate it. And then for about the next year, as I was tracking scores, my scoring average went down to 66. So I went from hitting it about as bad as I had as a competitive player to as good as I have as a competitive player. And a lot of times with good players, it's, a small little subtle change. Well, that time period wasn't a small little subtle change. We made some drastic changes. The frustrating thing for me is a lot of the stuff that you had to fix out is stuff that had been taught into me, unfortunately. So made it hard because I spent a lot of time ingraining those habits. But what was amazing is when I went back to a more natural athletic pattern, I actually picked it up pretty fast, and over time required a lot less practice than what I was doing.
Once you had it, now it's just kind of focusing on one or two little things to make you get back on the rails.
It's just maintenance, and that's what's funny, because now, today, I go back to the same things that we did 5 years ago. Now, thankfully, I pick it up even faster now than I did then, because I've ingrained it for so long.
Okay, so let's walk the viewers at home through kind of where you were and what we did to fix it to make the swing kind of where it is today.
Sure. So I'd say the first thing we tried to fix, and we fixed very quickly, was how my body wound up in the golf swing. So when I first came to you, and there was a lot of stuff that I didn't understand at the time that I do now, but what was killing me is my lead hip would always drop in the backswing. My hips and shoulders would be on a really, really steep plane. What I was doing with the club was actually intentional, which probably led to some of this, I'm sure. But I was spending a lot of time trying to unload the club that way at that time in my golf career, before I knew any better. And so what my swing would essentially look like is my hip would drop, and then the club would throw up over the top, and I would react by standing up and extending. So I was hitting it a lot shorter than I was capable of, and my club face stability was poor.
I still remember the first time you and I went out and played. You were the significantly shorter driver of the two of us at that point, which currently is not the case.
No, not anymore.
In case you were wondering what 330 carry looks like, here you go. But you didn't have the speed because you were trying to steer that sucker into the ball.
Yeah, I was just trying to square the face up pretty much entirely with timing, and it just blew my mind that I was trying to, at that time, rehearse a release that would keep the face square, yet the face would stay square and I could still hit snap hooks. And it's because the club was quite literally passing me and my body would shut off in rotation because of the whole chain of events leading to the impact. And the first thing that you had me work on, and I remember it to this day on the back side of the range back there, is spending a lot of time for me feeling like my hip my right leg was pushing up and everything was getting actually a little bit flatter and taller in my turn, because I was so this way leaned over it that I had to actually feel like I was turning flat and extending the upper part of my body to get taller.
And most of the lean over was actually happening in the hip complex, though.
And it was right off the bat.
Yeah, it was right away. Your lead hip would drop like that.
So What I've focused on since then is I spend a lot of time working on, for me, feeling like my hips turn flatter and feeling like I have a huge stretch in the left side of my body so that I'm extending and getting tall. Now, I have some feels that I always know if I'm doing a good job of executing this. And the first one is if my hands feel real fast off the ball, I know I'm not doing a very good job. It has to feel like my backswing is initiated by the windup of my body, and I want my hands to feel pretty quiet.
To kind of recap for everybody, the first thing we really wanted to fix was how we wind the system up and how we maintain the levels in our windup.
Definitely.
So we've got a stick through your belt. This is something we actually used with you
A lot.
quite a bit. Yes. In this drill, what I want you to demonstrate for everybody is how your hip turn, what it did before.
So what it did before is
You can see how down this lead hip went in the backswing, and what would happen in transition now is he'd have to jump it up.
I'd have to get up, and then my hands would react by doing something of that nature.
And I'm not sure the chicken or the egg
Something
there,
like
because you
that,
were doing
yeah.
stuff with your hands on purpose.
Yep.
And so I think your body might have started reacting to that.
It did, I think so.
So then what we had you do is do some wind ups. So now you're going to try to feel like that turns a significantly more level. It's still on an incline, but it's not on nearly as steep of an incline, right?
No, and the other thing is going back to kind of, we did a lot of just foundation one type shots with this drill, because as we discussed earlier, the secondary part of this is we just wanted to quiet my hands down in the takeaway, because I create lots of wrist extension early in my swing if I don't think about it. So when we paired these two drills of working on my levels and then just lots of those foundation one type of swings.
So foundation one, for those of you at home, is a swing where we basically eliminate the lever system.
Yeah,
so
so
you're just turning your arm structure back
I'm just
and
using
through.
entirely pivot, which was perfect for this drill because I could sit here and I could use that stick kind of out of the corner of my eye, like, okay, that's good. And then I would just hit a lot of foundation one, wind up, unwind, and do that until I was blue in the face.
Yes, we did a lot of that.
Because I wanted to get really good at making my wind up initiate the swing. And so if I didn't take the hands and wrist out, I would just fall back into my old pattern.
Yeah.
That's what allowed me to get through that and be able to actually make this change effectively.
But that also needed to be paired with some subtle changes in how our wrists and arms work. It's actually not subtle, they're quite extreme.
Yeah.
So what did we do? How did we change what your hands and arms were working?
Well, for starters, once we changed how my tilts worked, it got easier. Probably couldn't have executed the correct motion with how my body was working, at least not very easily. But we were trying to minimize forearm roll because I had a lot of it. I had a lot of forearm roll with my trail forearm going underneath early in my backswing. And I didn't really have the face super open, but the club would get really stuck behind me too because of what my wrists were doing. I was just throwing all the way to the club behind me early.
I think that's what led to your body creating those interesting inclines,
Yeah.
tilts, because you're trying to create enough down when your arms are
Yep.
too shallow. So now you're trying to figure out how to get that aim down there.
So as we were working on tilts, it was really easy for me to hit a bunch of soft shots, just essentially thinking keep nice wide structure and just minimize roll in my forearms. And once I got to about this point, everything fell into place in the backswing. When I sent everything in the right direction, it was pretty easy. But in the beginning, it was really natural for me to want to go that way. So it took some time for me just to get comfortable feeling like, okay, I can just keep my forearms feeling very, very neutral, essentially.
Yep.
And that was step two. And then from there, a lot of the downswing issues that I was having fell into place as we changed how I wind everything up.
I remember you specifically telling me, I like to focus on how I wind it up and let it all just kind of happen naturally.
Yep.
Because you felt like if you could get it wound up correctly, it would just automatically kind of do its thing.
And that goes back to a lot of your principles. From that point, the motion started to feel athletic again, and I started to feel like I was moving athletically as opposed to before it felt like I was doing everything I could just to square the face up. Whereas I remember the moment when I made my first like full good swing with it, and I just remember thinking, I don't even know what my hands really did. I mean, they did stuff, right? They always do, but I just kind of remember thinking like, oh, I just swung, and it's like, oh, cool, now I'm gonna swing harder because I'm not thinking about what the club face is doing anymore.
I remember when you started swinging harder.
Yeah, you just start swinging harder because it's like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not trying to square the face up, time it up, and it just became a lot easier. And then confidence builds rapidly.
It was like a snowball all of a sudden.
Yeah. A month after we started working together, I went out and I think it was the first tournament I had played. First competitive round of golf I'd played since we started working together. It was a Korn Ferry Tour Monday qualifier. That was the last web.com at that point, but Korn Ferry now. And I remember I went out and qualified, played great. I don't remember what I shot. Who knows? I think
64.
I Was it
I believe,
64?
yeah.
I remember I bogeyed the last hole, and I still made it in by 2. And I remember I was like, oh, okay, well that's kind of cool. And and that was only after 3 weeks, something like that. It's a long time ago now, but a short amount of time.
A lot of work though.
A lot of work, but a short amount of time.
So here's a really fun look back at exactly what Blake was describing. On the left we have Blake's swing from our first lesson, and on the right we have a swing that he made, I believe this was our second or third lesson, probably a week to 2 weeks later. So if we just look at the changes that he was making, you can really see exactly what he was describing. So he had more roll in his forearms going away. His lead side was dropping a little bit more, but you can really see the difference in the pitch of this shaft going back then versus by the second lesson, it's inside that ball. And there up top, how really laid off the club is. So what you'll see here, from that laid off position with the handle, here it's more right on plane. What you're going to see is as he changes direction, see how that shaft now steepens quite drastically? The club is tumbling out and over, where in the after golf swing, we're going to see that club shallowing out and staying more on plane. So now it's never really going to get outside the hands coming down. So there you go, it's inside the hands, and his arms won't get so under him with the club tumbling. So you can see how steep this shaft is. Let's get rid of some lines. You can see how steep that shaft is by how down his arm, his lead arm is hanging, where in the after, that shaft's going to be more shallow, and his lead arm is hanging a little bit more out away, not so much down under him. So it's not, handle's not dropping down and the club head tumbling out, which was causing a lot of his issues. So though they have a lot of similarities, just the general shape of these swings, this one rolled and steepened, and this one shallowing out somewhat, and today it's even doing a little bit more of that. This made all the difference. He went from struggling to control the ball to having almost complete control over it.
Blake, let's show everybody from face on what this pattern looks like, what the differences in the old and the new are, so they can kind of see how everything looks from a forward on position.
So from forward on, my lead hip was dropping, essentially creating a greater incline in my hips, right? And what I would pair that with is my forearms would roll and the club would come under, so my takeaway used to look something like this. Now, it's pretty clear from here, and it obviously wasn't clear to me at the time, but I can't move athletically how I'd want to in the downswing. I have to get back up out of the ground early and end up standing up and flipping it. So bad, and what it changed is feeling that hip staying high and a little less roll in the forearms. Now it starts to, in my practice swings, if you actually watch me in my practice swings a lot, my head is actually elevating.
Yes.
It doesn't happen
in a real
really
swing,
my
it
golf
doesn't
swing,
go
no.
up, but
So when I feel like I'm extending and getting tall, I don't do that, and I go from, instead, when we first started working together, I was maybe dropping 2-3 inches in the backswing for me to maintaining pretty level, but the more important aspect of it is now my tilts were correct.
Yeah.
More important than just what my head's doing.
and it allows you to move differently in the transition phase of the golf swing.
A lot
where you
differently.
can actually now have a little sink and unwind, where before you were...
It used to feel down, up. So now what I like to feel is, I always tell people, for me, if I'm hitting it really good, I kind of feel like my hands are quiet. I feel kind of up, down, up. And it's very fluid and smooth, but that's the sensation in my body. If I feel like I'm down early for me, I'm usually in big trouble. So I'm always aware of that sensation and trying to make sure that I steer clear of it.
All right, Blake, so I want you to show everybody what that sensation of up, down, up actually looks like when we hit a golf ball.
Well, I'll show you kind of my practice field swing, and then we'll see how much my head actually goes up in the backswing, or in the real swing. But you can kind of see, I feel like my hips turning real flat. I feel like I'm stretching up my left side, and I think when I make this practice swing, I probably do have a little bit of up. But it's gonna feel up, down, up. That's gonna be my sensation. Now we'll move in, and I'm just gonna try and recreate that feeling. It's gonna be lead hip stays tall, feel a big stretch.
Okay, so we can kind of see how you transformed your golf swing, and you also mentioned that now it's just maintenance. How do you maintain it? What are some of the things that you currently do to make sure that you don't get off the rails and go back to the crappy pattern?
The first thing for me, and you know this better than anybody, is to manage with my brain, because I am a notorious rabbit hole chaser. You know, I'm like the fox out there in the snow. Like, I'm always chasing rabbit holes, trying to figure out, always looking for some way to become more efficient, to become better, to hit it better. When generally speaking, when I go back to just those simple things, it always yields the best results. What killed me over the years, after we started working together, is I'd come back to you and I'd have an idea, a new idea. It's like, hey, I think I need to do this. The problem is, it's not even necessarily that what I was thinking was wrong, but when I lost my core focus and I started working on other elements of my golf swing that really didn't need the work, that didn't really impact my ball striking that much, I would get sidetracked and fall back into making these same mistakes. So for me, it's the first battle is just having the awareness to make sure that this is all good before I even think about touching on anything else. That's first and most important. And then from there, it's have 1 or 2 simple drills, feels that I consistently implement into my practice, my warm-up routine. Generally, since I'm not playing competitively, my practice isn't nearly as extensive and thorough as it used to be, just like it is for you. It's not as much of a priority to play as well as it was when it was my living. But I still want to play good golf. So what I've found is when I go out, if I just take 5 to 10 minutes early in my range session, and I take a simple drill like the one where we did the stick and just hit some foundation 1 style shots with a stick, boom, and all I do is real quiet hands, feel like my hip stays high using that stick in there, and hit like 5 to 10 of those, and then I just make it bigger. So then I just take that swing and I just grow it, and that's kind of how I warm up every day. If I do that, that's really about all it takes me, other than just managing the simple things of my golf swing, my alignment, my ball position, the stuff that all of us get off on if we don't pay attention. But if I just keep it that simple, where it's alignment, ball position, and those couple feels, I generally don't find that I get too far off.
What I find with everybody, myself included, is my tendencies are my tendencies, and I tend to fall back. Whether I think I have or not, I fall back into those patterns that kind of mess things up. And if I just stay focused on the things that fix my tendencies, I stay on track.
So I think there's 2 things to answer that question. The first one is make sure you have good drills once you've accomplished the change you're trying to make, so that you can continually manage that. And the second thing is, this is something that just comes with experience of hitting a lot of golf balls too, is being able to have the awareness, understand, hey, if the golf ball's doing X, Y, or Z, I'm probably doing what I used to do. And the other thing, I said, I have a couple feels, so, because I can't see the inclination of my hips, I can't even necessarily feel the exact inclination of my hips. So what I can feel is, if my takeaway gets really fast, the sensation of getting fast, I know I'm probably going down that path. So I'm just aware of a few things, and if I start to hit it poorly, I think, like, hey, does my takeaway feel like it's flying off the golf ball, because that's what it used to feel like? And then I know I probably go back to the range, do my drills, and then usually I'm off and rolling again.
Well, looking back, it was really fun to watch how you progressed. It wasn't exactly fun watching you go from hitting it shorter than me to out driving me pretty consistently, but
you're never catching back up either.
I'm getting old. Blake turned into quite a ball striking machine. For a period of time, you were about as good as anybody I've ever seen. Yeah. Hopefully you all like this video. Please come visit us at milolinesgolf.com, where we can help you understand what your tendencies are, how to solve them, and how to stay on the right track. You can work with Blake as well here in Arizona or online. You can find him at milolinesgolf.com.